Good morning, Kat. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I've had my cup of coffee this morning and I am
Delightful.
ready.
Sealed up in a
Speaking
box
of,
fort.
oh yes, blanket fort for the win. I think
Love
this
it.
is just where I live now.
You should get a camera outside the blanket fort. I want to see, like, all the times you like bang your head on, the top or like an elbow goes awry and you should see this like amorphous shape inside your house bobbing around.
I'm just a ghost
Yeah.
under the covers, just waiting.
Um, Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, for listening to my silly voice and Kat's lovely voice. Today, we are going to be
Aw.
talking about season 1, episode 5, Mushu to go. Lots happens. I'm very excited to dive in. Very excited to dive in. It aired February 9th, just after my birthday, 2016. It was adapted from the books by Cassie Clare, written by Ed Decter and Angel Dean Lopez, directed by Kelly Macon, starring lots of us,
All of us.
all of us, basically. But importantly, the first time that we get to meet Nicola is this episode. Correct? Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
not
it
wrong. It
is.
is.
I'm
It is
so
the first
excited.
time. Um, and Kat, tell us what we're in store for.
So, side note, I love Mushu, both the dish and the Disney character. Um, just felt like that needed to
Totally.
go out in the universe. Just shout out.
Ugh,
Also, logline. Things go awry when Alec watches Clary. Tensions
of
escalate
course they
between
do.
Alec.
Of
I mean,
course they
always,
do.
right? Are there any surprises here?
Right?
Not at all. Tensions escalate between Alec and Clary, but when Jace and Isabel are sent on an intel mission to the Sealeys by Maryse Lightwood, Alec is put in charge of keeping Clary safe, much to both of their chagrin. With his hard as nails mother back in town and Clary's rule breaking tendencies, Alec finds himself struggling to stick to the Clave's rules while keeping his promise to Jace. Meanwhile, the New York City werewolf pack begins their hunt for Clary and the Mortal Cup.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. I feel like
Lots.
in this episode, as we dive into the Shadow World more, it's Clary's just going, look, I didn't even know I was a Shadow Hunter. Everybody's hunting me now. I don't even know how to handle it. Thank goodness for the Shadow Hunters.
Yeah, it's an exasperating episode 5 for sure. Um, Lots goes on. This is one of my favorite episodes because we get to see like Parkour Simon, Spider Simon for the first time,
Yes.
and I'm super excited to unpack that later. And I know Alberto will talk about this when we got him on, but he is such a physical being anyway
Mm-hmm.
that I know he was very excited to start, jumping off stuff and climbing and ripping doors off the hinges and so on and so forth. So, with
Indeed.
no gilding the lily and absolutely no further ado whatsoever, let's dive on in.
So, a couple of fun facts. We touched on this last time when we were teasing this episode, but we shot this episode in July of 2015, which, as we know, was a very warm month
It was a
in
warm month.
Toronto.
As we know
And
specifically that it was a very warm month.
we had no air conditioning in the studio at the time, so we were navigating quite a few things, which we'll get into in some of the later scenes.
We sure will. The two episodes that I remember being this bad temperature wise was this one, and then in the belly of the container ship, that fight
Oh my god! Around the same time of year, actually, I think that was
around the
also
same time of year.
July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also with no AC, that was the big issue. Just this one was bad. The one in the belly of the ship, which obviously we'll get into closer to when that airs. But that I was sweating so much that day and the temperature was so hot that I couldn't tell I was sweating anymore because the sweat was coming out of my body the same temperature as outside. So they were
I
like,
remember
we have
that.
to stop, we have to wipe you down. And I'm like, I'm not sweating. And they're like, you are sweating. You're sweating a
Yeah.
whole bit. It's like dripping off you. And
You're just
Shadowhunters, as we
glistening.
found out, were not supposed to sweat.
That's true. I remember we had this discussion it was actually this episode that we
Hmm.
had this discussion. Alec and Clary have a scene where they are training and they sort of spar in the institute. And at this time, our institute set had, it's meant to be within the church, but they had put glass walls on the inside of the church walls, and they used to put the lights on the outside of the glass.
Hmm.
So you have these giant movie lights. And for those of you at home who have not been on a movie set, the lights that we use are quite large, very bright and as such quite warm. So
Mm.
if you put a bright light on the outside of glass, if you've ever put, a magnifying glass to the sun in the summer on the sidewalk and seen how concentrated the light can get and the heat, that's very much the
That's
environment
what it
we were
felt
in.
like, for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mention. I'm in my PJs, by the way, just so everyone can see. I'm in sort of
I
an
mean,
all-in-one satin. Cat is really representing us in the costume department on this podcast. But it's funny that you mentioned, because that's what I was going to say. Is like, when we walked on set, it felt like ants meet magnifying glass. This is going to be your day. You know,
yeah. Well, and it was even to the point where the cameras stopped working. It got so hot when Matt and I were shooting that scene.
they
The
did.
cameras
Yeah,
just shut down. They get to a certain point of heat where they shut down. And it was at that point that the makeup team looked at us and said, "So, Shadowhunters sweat now."
we
And we were
sweat. There's
both
nothing we can do
just
about it. What they usually use.
dripping.
Makeup artists, what they use when you're on set and you start to look a little shiny, which means you have started to perspire and whatever, they use this blue like strip, like a very thin. It almost looks a bit like tracing paper, and they just sort of
Mhm,
like rub it on your sort of T zone, like your oily T zone, um,
mhm.
and these strips absorb the excess moisture, and then that was it. And I remember those days, them coming out with like handfuls of these things and trying to put them on, and they were like, right, these are fucking useless, someone get me a towel, because they were all saturated. Like,
Yeah.
we're getting rid of this idea, we're going to just use a towel.
They ended up with blue industrial paper towels for us when we
That's
were doing
right.
fight scenes because
Oof.
that was the only thing that would keep the runes intact, oddly, but
Mm,
mop up the sweat. That's the other thing. We had, the runes that we wear in the show are these transfer tattoos that, the same kind you get from a vending machine at a store. And even though we would seal them with a myriad of sealants and sealers and
yeah,
devices and technology, um, sometimes you sweat enough and in a leather jacket, they just
they just
peel
come right
right
off.
off.
They just come right off. The irony being, at the end of the day, they're fucking impossible to get off.
Of
And you
course,
just want to go
when you
home
want
and you're
them to
like,
get
I'm
off.
tired. I have like 40 of these things on my body. Can you please get them off me now? And it takes a team of people scrubbing at you. Um,
But huge credit to our makeup team that figured out eventually that packing tape takes runes off in the blink of an
yeah,
eye.
we'll talk about that later as well. I have my issues with
Some
that.
other fun facts. This episode we see a lot more Malik as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we get to see a bit of, as we've mentioned before, Clary and Alec's relationship.
We do. We also,
Oh, and we see the JC box for the first time.
we do see the JC box for the first time. Correct. Um, what is actual Jonathan's last name?
Morgenstern.
No, the C. What does the C stand for?
Jonathan Christopher.
It is
That's his
Jonathan
middle name, his
Christopher.
surname.
But what's
Yeah,
my middle name?
Jonathan Christopher.
It is Jonathan Christopher as well. Because I
Yeah.
was trying to explain this to Decca, and she was like, "Is that box yours?" And I'm like,
The box of indeterminate ownership.
AJ and AC. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, that was I was like I myself got lost, and there are fun memes and stuff all over the place, and have been since the beginning, of like, what is Jace's last name? And I'm praying for the day that nobody asks me, what was your last name in this episode? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know when we were filming it. I don't know. I don't know the answers. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot of
There's
questions.
a lot of
Clary just has
questions.
a lot of them, and yours keeps changing.
Yeah.
Um,
We
that,
also, poor
heaven
Simon.
forbid they were ever to have wedding invitations and have to write,
Yeah.
Clarissa, Adele, Frey, Morgenstern, Fairchild marrying you with all the
Yeah.
last names.
Jonathan Christopher, Wayland, Lightwood, Morgenstern, Herondale.
There
Um,
you go.
wow, I
Whew.
do know them. Look at that. Right off the
There you
tongue.
go. Good job.
Um,
At 7 in the morning.
at 7
Bravo.
in the morning. Who knew? Because where did we end up? We ended up. Well, I digress.
Well,
I
we'll get
caught
there.
myself
We'll
with that
get
one, but we
there.
will get there. We also, for
Well
anyone who's
done.
keeping count later on in this episode, get to see Upside Down Simon again. Poor guy.
Again.
Poor guy
Add another
spent.
tick to the Upside Down Simon
I
count.
know. Yeah. Whoever's keeping the tally out there, thank you very much. One, for doing that, because we are not. And two, it's another tick in the Upside Down Simon box.
Hmm.
Let's see. Book to screen, Kat. This is your foray.
Yes. So we have the Jonathan Christopher box, which is JC. Valentine, we find, was not super creative in naming his um,
Not even
male
kids, like prodigies,
steeds.
like
Yeah,
his
his
experiments, I suppose.
progenies,
Hmm.
experiments, lots of. He just loved the name Jonathan Christopher. He's like,
He's a
one of
big
these
fan.
days, it's gonna stick.
Yeah.
Maybe that was his dad's name or something. We don't know.
Yeah, one of these JCs. Maybe he just wanted one JC, and so many of them kept like dying or turning evil. He was like, one of them's gonna stick. There's gonna be one JC, and he's gonna be my buddy, and that's gonna be it. We're gonna make pasta, and it's gonna be delightful.
I still have a bone to pick with Valentine because he
Yeah,
made the pecorino pasta for every one of his children except for me,
yeah.
and
Just the
I'm
just the
still
ones he
bitter about
liked.
it. Clearly.
Just the good ones.
Anywho, just the good
Anywho,
ones, just the
just the good
Jonathan
ones.
Christophers.
Yeah. Um,
Uh,
keep going.
let's see. Oh, so Simon does not get kidnapped by the werewolves, and I can't remember if Clary does get kidnapped by the werewolves in the books. It's, I mean, Simon and Clary get kidnapped so many times by so many different
Hmm.
people. I would just assume that it happened. I actually didn't realize that Simon was not kidnapped. And then, interesting, Jason Clary's romance started earlier in the novels and is not abundantly clear yet in the TV show. I
Hmm.
That's interesting to me
That
because
is
I think
interesting.
in reading the books, I didn't realize that it blossomed sooner, but perhaps I think that comes from the fact that, the books are told from Clary's perspective in much more
Mm,
of a first person way. So you get a lot more of her internal monologue throughout the books. And so as she's developing feelings for Jace, there's a lot of monologuing about that internally, but
interesting.
it's not necessarily something that she's going to
Well,
pull
then
Simon aside and be like,
you
"Oh my
know, in
god, I
the
met this
books, it's not
guy.
potentially
I'm
this
feeling
budding
things."
romance necessarily so much as it is one person having feelings for another, and we don't know whether
Yeah.
they're reciprocated or not, which I think actually we kind of do in the show. There is a lot of
Yeah.
this, like, obviously, Jace feels a certain way about Clary, but we don't know what that is yet, whether it's this sort of. Um, quasi like adoption of another stray that he sees a lot of himself in, or whether it's a romantic relationship or whatever. And we also don't really know that from you at this point either, because you've had a couple looks towards Simon, and obviously there's this connection between us, and you mentioned that Simon's your best friend, and we I digress, but
Quite the
interesting.
love pentagram at this point.
It very much is, yeah, very much so.
We'll get to the octagon later.
Yeah, god, yeah, it's all happening, it's all happening. um The music,
Something else
we
that I
haven't
found.
talked about the music
Oh yeah,
fully
that's true.
in any of the episodes yet. I didn't realize that we had the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in this,
And another JC,
and
Jonathan
another
Carney.
JC. Yes, we do. Jonathan Carney, very good. And then Fleury, is that how you say
Sure.
that person's
Yeah.
name?
Great
Fleury,
artist.
Soldier.
Never said it out loud.
Never said it out loud. I actually think I have that one. I'm pretty sure I have that song. I think I heard it in the show, and I was like, "That's a jam. I'm going to be driving to that. Let's see."
And of course, the
Sure do.
incomparable This Is the Hunt by Ruel,
Of course, yeah.
which became our theme song. And actually, one of my favorite memories of our Comic Cons over the years was I think it was Brussels the first time it
Mm,
happened. At the end of the Comic Con, you go up on stage and kind of say thank you so much for coming, and we thank the staff, and we kind of wave goodbye to everyone, and usually dance or sing or do something silly. And all of us were standing on stage. This was right after the series finale aired. The lights
mhm.
go down. All of the fans pull out these heart-shaped balloons from under their chairs and start singing the theme song. Start singing "This Is the Hunt." I just remember all of us instantly burst into tears because I call them kids. They're not kids, but I feel like kids of the show, as it were. But they took such care and time to come up with this surprise and to execute it so beautifully and keep it from all of us. It was such a touching moment.
It was. Yeah, that was a really special moment for us. Um, how lovely.